test, mic test, mic test, hello. Mic testing, hello. Test, mic test. Mic testing, hello. Mic test, 1, 2, 3. Test mic, 1, 2. Mic testing, hello. 1, 2, 3. Mic test, 1, 2, 3. Mic testing, hello.
Alam mo ba kung bakit tinawag na crop of opportunities ang coconut? Ang puno ng niyog ay tinatawag na crop of opportunities dahil hindi lamang tayo binibigyan ng masarap at masustansyang bunga nito, kundi lahat ng bahagi ng buong puno mula sa itaas hanggang sa ibaba ay may pakinabang at pwedeng gamitin. Ito ay ilan lang sa mga food products na nanggaling sa niyog. Sa katunayan, ang niyog ay ang may pinakamayamang pinagbumulan ng lauric acid na kung saan ito ay mayroong antibacterial at antiviral properties. Bukod sa mga food products, narito naman ang ilan sa mga non-food products na pwedeng mabuo galing sa punong ito nang hindi mo inaakalang pwede pala. O diba? Ating tangkilikin ang iba't ibang produkto ng niyog upang matulungan at guminhawa ang buhay ng ating mga magniniyog at nang sa gayon matulungan nating umangat pa ang industriya ng niyog sa ating bansa.
Lami!
Coco Pandesal. Gawa sa coconut at wheat flour. Nagbibigay ng protein, iron, at vitamin A. Rich in fiber and good source of protein. Kaya kumain na ng Coco Pandesal.
With its fresh and mild flavor, the coconut reigns supreme among tropical fruit.
But more than standing as a majestic backdrop for your beach photos or a delectable reminder of the hot summer sun, the coconut palm represents life for people around the world. In the Philippines alone, millions of farmers rely on the coconut for their livelihood. Their crops yield essential products like coconut oil and coir, which are used at home and abroad by various industries. The Philippine economy overall has been greatly supported by the national coconut industry for at least a century. The many uses of the palm impressed the Italian scribe Antonio Pigafetta so much that he noted them in his chronicle of his voyage with Ferdinand Magellan. Spanish chroniclers recorded the use of the coconut as food, drink, and medicine by the Filipino population whom they encountered. The coconut was exported to Mexico by the Spanish through the galleon trade. With this rich history, what more can we discover about coconuts? Find out by joining us as we crack the shell of myth surrounding the coconut. The coconut, or the Cocos nucifera, is native to the tropics, including the Philippines. It is believed to have evolved 100 million years ago and was carried by the moving land masses to what is now Southeast Asia and a southern part of the Indian subcontinent. Aside from genetics, linguistics points to how coconuts were dispersed along with human migrants from the Indo-Malayan region. Tagalog and the Chamorro language share the same word for coconut, nyog. Meanwhile, other Austronesian languages have similar words for coconut, new or nyor in Malay, and new in Polynesian and Melanesian. Contrary to its international name, the coconut is actually a fruit, specifically a drupe, rather than a nut. The nyog got its international name after the Portuguese word coco, which refers to a mythological creature and also means head or skull. To the European crew, the shell of the nyog resembled the head, and so they named the unfamiliar fruit coconut. Another Western name given to it was Nux indica, or Indian nut. Over time, the coconut reached different regions through human movement and trade, but this was just one way it reached new lands. The coconut also had help from the sea. The structure of the coconut gives its buoyancy and protection from the elements. The inside is hollow, which helps it float, while the outside is tough and watertight. The coconut is thus able to move across oceans towards other coasts, where it can eventually take root. This explains how coconuts related to the Pacific type currently thrive on the west coast of North and Middle America. Now, let's get deeper into the coconut's botanical properties. According to Mr. Giro Adorador,
many people refer to coconut as trees. They call it coconut tree. But actually, it should be coconut palms. Why? Because palm is a group of plants under the family Arecaceae, whereas a tree is actually a plant habit which is defined by a singular trunk and a crown of leaves which exhibits secondary growth. Palms actually do not possess vascular cambium to exhibit secondary growth. Instead, their primary, shoot, and root meristems are continually active alongside with intercalary meristems. They continue to grow in girth or in diameter. But in trees, there's actually a growth in the secondary cambium which give rise to what we call as the wood and the bark. Though the coconut being tree-like in structure, it's more appropriate to call it as coconut palm because they do not exhibit secondary growth. When it comes to their fruit, they call it coconut, but it's actually just the name. Botanically, it is different from a nut. Despite both drupes and a nut are one-seeded and indehiscent, they do not break open at maturity. The drupe has actually fibrous and or fleshy parts, whereas those of the nut are entirely hard and stony. When you take a cross-section of a coconut fruit, it has fibrous parts that makes it a drupe and not a nut.
Now that we know that the Cocos nucifera is scientifically a fruit, and that it grows on a palm, we can distinguish it from the other so-called nuts. This is important because this fruit has been labeled as a tree nut under the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act of 2004 in the USA. But scientifically speaking, the coconut is a drupe and should not be classified as a tree nut. Also, studies conducted state that an allergy to coconut is rare. These same studies even recognize the lack of research on the coconut as a major food allergen. Dr. Maria Concepcion C. Lizada discusses about allergen and why coconut should not be classified as a major allergen.
A food allergen is a protein in food which, when eaten, can make our immune system react in a way that leads to allergic symptoms. These symptoms can range from mild, such as hives on the skin or swelling of the lips, or severe, involving obstruction of the breathing pathways, and anaphylactic shock, which can be fatal. In 2006, the US FDA issued a guidance list for its 2004 regulation on labeling for food allergens. Unfortunately, in that list, the coconut plant was included among the plants bearing tree nuts, in spite of the fact that the list itself identified the coconut as a palm. The coconut itself is actually a drupe, a type of fruit. Therefore, the coconut is not a tree nut. Then the question arises, if it's not a tree nut, is it a major allergen? In a 2017 review paper, Catherine Anagnostu of the Immunology, Allergy, and Rheumatology section of the Texas Children's Hospital noted that although coconut might elicit allergic reactions in some children, these reactions are very rare. She pointed out that reports of immunoglobulin E or IgE-mediated coconut allergy are rare. She also noted that the coconut, in the first place, is not a nut but a fruit. A 2019 UK article, reviewed by an allergy medicine specialist, states that, quote, reports of allergy to coconut in medical and scientific journals are highly uncommon compared with those reports that focus on tree nuts, unquote. The article concludes that in the UK, allergy to coconut is rare. A paper from Sydney reported only 9 cases of coconut anaphylaxis and 26 cases of less severe IgE-mediated coconut allergy in over 5,000 patients. The paper concludes that although it is a real clinical entity, coconut allergy is rare. The paper further recommends that patients with tree nut allergies should be reassured that coconut is not a nut, but a drupe, and that true coconut allergy has a low incidence in both the general population and those with tree nut and other food allergies. The World Trade Organization, or WTO,
Good morning, everyone. May we request everybody to please proceed to your assigned seats, and we will start or continue our symposium in a short while. And just a reminder lang po, before we begin our activity today, just please wear your ID as provided in the registration area. May we also request that all your cellular phones be on silent mode during the proceeding of the program. We are also live via Facebook and YouTube. You may also wish to share this event to your colleagues who might be interested in this forum. And please do not forget to click the like and share button. And our secretariat provided a QR code, maybe flash on the screen. And as you can see in your table, wherein you can directly write your questions later, no, during the presentation of our panel speakers. Kindly reserve your questions later, and this will be answered during the panel discussion. Should you have also any concerns, we have our designated secretariat inside this venue whom you may approach. We have also unlimited coffee, water, and tea available and are located at the back of the hall. Thank you. We are about to start our program. May I request everyone to please stand. Let us bow down our head and feel the presence of our Lord Almighty Father. Let us pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Loving Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning asking for your blessing and guidance as we will continue our second day symposium. We pray for safety and protection. Shower your gifts of wisdom to all our leaders, especially to our panel speakers today and all the participants of this exercise. Let us be united under the Bagong Pilipinas campaign of this administration's governance and leadership. Please give us energy to give our best efforts to serve our country, especially our farmers, particularly our coconut farmers and stakeholders, with all honesty, integrity, and patriotism. Have mercy on us, Lord, that in the times of great needs and worries, we come to you for help. Direct us to the right path as we acknowledge your kingdom to reign forever. This and all the good desires of our hearts, we ask and pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, please be seated. Good morning, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second day or the last day of our symposium on the benefits of coconut products here at the Philippine International Convention Center in Pasay City, Philippines. This activity is jointly organized by the Philippine Coconut Authority and the Department of Trade and Industry as part of the 30th National Coconut Week celebration on the theme Paghubog sa Pilipinong magniniyog daan sa pag-angat ng ekonomiya at pag-unlad na bagong Pilipinas. Yesterday we have discussed several topics on the following. Number one, we have discussed the rediscovering heavenly dew of life, exploiting the advantages of coconut liquid endosperm by Engineer Ivan Titus Paul Labrador. Nandito pa si Sir, palakpakan po natin. We have also discussed the coconut byproducts as functional foods for managing blood sugar and cholesterol levels as presented by Ms. Amster Fe Bakiran. Ano si ma'am, no? We have also fully informed by the PSA's or Philippine Statistics Authority's presentation on understanding the measurement of gross value added, the contribution of coconut to the economy, which was presented by Mr. Mark Pascasio of PSA. We have also inspired by Dr. Vermin Viralio Ruel on her presentation on how the dietary VCO can help lessen the burden of inflammatory diseases. We have also further discussed and given coconut products transform into medical and beauty, healthy cosmetics, like the coco cellulose as introduced and presented by Dr. Aisel Ampong Chicano on her presentation entitled Leveraging Coco Cellulose, Revolutionizing Cosmetics and Medical Application. So having said that, I know we have acquired so much knowledge coming from those presentations. Remember that knowledge is power. Agree? Yes, knowledge is power. But for me, I always emphasize that knowledge is power only when we put it into use. Tama ba? Yes. So that's why we will use later our power, Let's have a quick quick exercise. Let's give ourselves a coco clap. Kalimutan. Hindi sila. Secretariat, ilista mo. Ang hindi magpa-participate, mamaya, nakikita, di ba? Sasayaw dito sa harap. Alright, isa pa. Quick exercise. Details of this event, I would like to invite Ms. Marjorie Atienza of PSA to share the mechanics with us.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marge Atienza from the Market Research and Promotions Division of PCA. So for our pledge of support and commitment, as mentioned by Ms. Rose, ang conclusion po ng ating activity is designing. So if you are wondering po bakit meron tayong white Sintra board dun sa side ng ating venue, that will be where we sign our pledge of support and commitment. So yung ilalagay po natin doon, magdi-distribute po ang secretariat ng forms. After the discussion, the presentations po ng ating mga RPs, ano yung ating mga pwedeng i-commit or i-support towards promoting yung ating Philippine coconut industry, especially the coconut farmers. So may predetermined na po kami ng mga activities na pwede nyong i-check, and then if you can provide us a brief description on what you will do, what resources you will need, and what agencies should be your partner in those actions, pwede pong palagay na lang dun sa ating form. And if ever may na iisip pa po kayong other activities that we can collaborate, meron din pong part dun sa form na pwede nyo lagyan. So, after po naming makolate yung forms this lunch, we will write those po sa ating board and then magsasign po tayo sa ating ending mamaya. So that will be the mechanics of our pledge of support and commitment. Thank you po.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Atienza from PCA. Sorry, with your kind indulgence. All right. So may we now proceed to our first presenter. She is a distinguished expert in food science and biochemistry, holding a PhD from the University of California, Davis, with a career spanning over 4 decades. She has significantly contributed to the fields of food quality and safety. Currently a professor emeritus at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, she has been instrumental in developing and coordinating courses on food quality and safety through her role as a senior fellow at the Southeast Asia Regional Center for Graduate Study and Research in Agriculture, also known as CIRCA. Her extensive experience includes serving as the first acting director of the Bureau of Agriculture and Fisheries Product Standard in the Philippines, where she focused on risk-based regulation of product quality. She has garnered international recognition with numerous publications in peer-reviewed journal and patents in food technology. She has also received several prestigious awards, including the International Federation of Asia Chemical Society's Achievement Award, for her contribution to economic advancement through chemical research. To present chemical uniqueness of coconut oil and biochemical implication, please join me welcoming Dr. Maria Concepcion C. Lisada. Let's give a warm round of Coco Club!
If you don't mind, I will sit down for the presentation. Good morning, everybody. I had to rethink my presentation because it's quite a bit of chemistry, and I know that people are not too happy about, having to deal with chemistry. But I'll try to make it appreciable, and I'll give you the reason why, in fact, I thought of this paper. In fact, CIRCA is encouraging the publication of this presentation. It's just a part, actually, chemical uniqueness is quite, covers quite a bit of what can be said about coconut. But I'll only cover the aspects that might remotely be related to health. But I'd like to warn you at the very beginning, I'm not going to deal directly with health. The starting point of anything is chemistry, of course, and the implications are actually wide. But I limit it to biochemistry, which again is another starting point for future considerations that are related to health. So chemical uniqueness, that's what I'll focus on. What's so unique about coconut oil in particular that can separate it from the other oils? Where do I point it? Saan ko po point dito? It's sad that coconut oil is lumped with other saturated fats. In the first place, the position of the United States dietary guidelines on saturated fats is at most tenuous. It's really controversial at this point. And in fact, if you want to read an interesting history of the making and unmaking of scientific consensus on saturated fat, there's a 2022 paper by Ty Colts, and it's a very good paper, and it really points out how science can be either ignored completely or it can be misused. So this, what you see here, oops. What you see here are quotes from the US dietary guidelines. So saturated fat, pointer ito. Okay. Okay, all right. So thanks. Saturated fat is found in high fat meat, but together with this, they lump both coconut oil, palm kernel, and palm oil. And that's a recurring theme in the US dietary guidelines. So it's lumped with saturated fats, particularly animal fats. And we'll see later on. Saan ba ipo-point ito? Okay. So saturated dietary lipids are called fats since they're solid or congealed in temperate countries, particularly during the cooler months. And in fact, I'll point out that, they take advantage of the wrong notion that if you take in saturated fats, like for example, magbubulalo kayo na merong sebo, mamumuo yun do sa mga veins, mga capillaries, etc. No? So that's a very wrong notion, but a popular notion that's nevertheless taken advantage of. If you can control it, I think that will be better. So in South Africa, they call coconut oil hard fats because of this tendency to congeal. And the US dietary guidelines excludes coconut oil from the category known as oils. No? So, but chemically, when one thinks about it, coconut oil differs very much from the other saturated fats. And, supposedly, when you have arguments that would restrict the consumption or the sales of a particular food product, you need to back it up with scientific information. So it should be science-based. But really, the lumping of coconut oil with saturated fats has no scientific basis, particularly when one goes through the finer points of the composition of coconut oil. Next, please. All right. So, in fact, in the United States, most of the saturated fats consumed are from animal foods, no? So, meats and dairy products. And yet, next slide, please. And yet, you will see that, in fact, they conveniently include coconut oil in some sections of the dietary guidelines. All right, this is the popular notion. Simply because coconut oil is solid at temperatures less than 24, or 24 or less than 24 degrees centigrade, particularly in cooler climates, they associate it with the supposedly ill effects of saturated fats. But in fact, this is a photo taken in the United States where you see coconut oil, the same coconut oil. On the right, you have it during the cooler months, and on the left, during the summer months. So it liquefies, no? Next slide, please. So, this is how they word the inclusion of coconut oil in saturated fats. So first of all, of course, they have to mention that the main source of saturated fats would be your animal and your dairy products. But then they conveniently include palm oil and coconut oil. Next, please. All right, so these are some examples of solid fats, but they fail to mention that in fact, if you ingest coconut oil, it will liquefy at body temperature, which is much higher than 24 degrees. So at 37 degrees centigrade, of course, you're going to have coconut oil liquefy. And then when you think of saturated fats from animals, from animal products, the melting point is much, much higher than 37 degrees centigrade. So, nagsesebo nga siya, no? So, one single dietary component that is a big source of saturated fats is cheese, no? Cheddar cheese melts at 32 degrees centigrade, but nevertheless, higher than the melting point of coconut oil. But really, the difference between coconut oil and the other saturated fats is not highlighted in these guidelines. And this is also disseminated in some articles. No? If you look at the lower left photo, yun yung sebo. And you have these notions dito, locally. Mamumuo yan sa katawan mo. Kasi kung titingnan mo, lumamig lang yung inyong bulalo nandyan na yung nagsesebo ng gusto. No? Next slide, please. Alright. Ito ngayon yung chemical uniqueness ng coconut oil. The fatty acids that constitute the triglycerides, yung mga triglycerides will be the components of your oil, no? Are actually most of them are actually shorter in chain length, no? So, nagkaroon ng confusion earlier as to whether lauric acid, remember coconut oil is about 50%, and you'll hear more of it in the next presentation by Dr. Dairit, no? They don't know where to put lauric acid, whether it's a long-chain fatty acid or a medium-chain fatty acid. Fortunately, in 2010, the WHO, FAO expert consultation came up with this classification. So clearly, medium-chain fatty acids would include fatty acids that are 8 to 13 carbons in length. So, lauric acid is a medium-chain fatty acid. Before this, you see lauric acid being classified as long-chain fatty acid, but now most literature classifies your lauric acid as a medium-chain fatty acid. But note that, in fact, there are other medium-chain fatty acids. Like I said, I'm not going to talk directly about health, but even if they're in smaller amounts than lauric acid, they can have profound effects biochemically. Next slide, please. Let's look at the medium-chain fatty acids. You have your caproic acid or hexanoic acid down to lauric acid. So you see, as you go through this progression, you have increasing chain lengths, no? And that has important implications. In fact, throughout this paper, you'll have to go back to this structure and how it differs from the long-chain fatty acids. Next slide, please. So these are the long-chain fatty acids, starting with myristic acid, which has 14 carbons, palmitic acid, 16, and stearic acid, 18. I am avoiding any extensive discussion of polyunsaturated acids until the end. No, I'll point out a distinct advantage of coconut oil at the end. So you see, again, you have a progression of the chain length. No? Next slide, please. So why should we focus on fatty acids? The moment dietary fats come into contact with the mouth, with the oral cavity, there's a lipase. And depending on how well you chew, the lipase will start breaking down your triglycerides. No? And some of the lipases have a preference for medium chain fatty acids. So in other words, your medium chain, your triglycerides that are made up of medium chain fatty acids get mobilized even in the mouth, they get broken down even in the mouth. And this lipase is actually mixed, the lingual, they call it lingual lipase, which is made in the tongue, is actually mixed with the dietary fats so that, it's also taken down through the gastrointestinal system. And this is especially, when you look at, there are developmental as well as evolutionary advantages of, medium chain fatty acids. And I'll go into that later more. All right, MCFA, and that's why when you look at breast milk, for example, MCFA or medium chain fatty acids are a key component of breast milk. Next slide, please. All right, this is the key to the chemical uniqueness of coconut oil. I mean, in relation particularly to saturated fats of animal origin. So if you look at this, highlighted would be your medium chain fatty acids, no? And very different from rendered pork fat or from tallow. Butter fat is similar because of, or at least there's some similarity, not entirely the same, because of the fact that it originates from milk, from cow's milk. Next slide, please. If you look at the ratio of the long-chain fatty acids to, I just included short-chain fatty acids for butter, the ratio of long-chain fatty acids to the shorter-chain fatty acids, like MCFA, this is what you get. So coconut oil is about 0.5, no? And then pork fat, animal fat is really way, way high, much, much higher. Butter fat, it's still higher, but of course it's lower than other animal fats. And palm oil is actually much higher than your coconut oil. So when you think about it, lower fluidity that they highlight in coconut oil, particularly during the cooler months, is not the main element that distinguishes coconut oil from the other saturated fats. Then there is a principle in chemistry, but in biochemistry, it's, once you take up biochemistry, it's drummed into your head, structure, function. You have to go back to the basic chemistry, and then you can rationalize the function of that particular biochemical. So there's that structure-function relationship. And the SAR, or the structure-activity relationship, is a very well-accepted approach. So you start with the basics, and then you can rationalize what might be proven by studies, or you can get insights as to what the activity of that particular component is. And in this particular case, what is of interest is your medium chain fatty acids in coconut oil. Next slide, please. All right, so, you've seen that earlier, that saturated long-chain fatty acids would be less than half of total saturated fatty acids in coconut oil. And actually, like I said, it's your medium-chain fatty acids that render coconut oil unique among the widely consumed dietary or culinary fats. So, and in fact, it's the whole set of medium-chain fatty acids that might actually be the key to how your coconut oil or the triglycerides and the fatty acids in particular behave in biological systems. And of course, this has been pointed out that not all saturated fats are created equal, you know? Because the shorter chain fatty acids are very different. They behave differently from the long chain fatty acids. Next slide, please. All right. There is, I'm sure you're familiar with this, that fatty acids have two main components that would dictate how they behave in biological systems. You have the nonpolar part, which is highlighted by the red bracket, and then the polar carboxyl group, or the acid part of it. Acids are supposed to be polar, but it depends on the aliphatic, the length of the non-polar end. So if it's longer, if the carbon chain is longer, of course the polarity goes down. No? So you have a decrease in polarity. But it's because of this nature of your fatty acid, it is amphiphilic. No? And it can act like a detergent. In fact, that's the basis for coming up with soaps. Next slide, please. All right, so chain length, just to emphasize, you have longer chain fatty acids, less polar, more hydrophobic. Ano bang, when you say hydrophobic, it's like hydrophobia. Di ba yung mga may rabies natatakot sa tubig? Ganon din ang nangyayari sa ating mga long-chain fatty acids. And they're practically insoluble in water, or very, very low solubility in water. Next slide, please. Kanya nga tubig at langis, no, hindi naghahalo. Chain length of medium chain fatty acids, because of this polarity and because of the size, they require less processing for them to be taken up by the body and used for the purpose. For energy, particularly for medium chain fatty acids. So reduced requirement for processing and allows movement. They can easily go through membranes. Medium chain fatty acids can easily go through membranes. But long chain fatty acids have to be packed before they can go through the enterocytes. So you have what you call micelle formation. I'll show you diagrams of micelles. And chylomicrons. You've heard of chylomicrons in relation to health as well. No? So they have to be packed in globules. The long-chain fatty acids, in contrast to medium-chain fatty acids, have to be packed. They have to be repacked in globules so that they can be circulated through the system. And there's a different pathway between your medium-chain fatty acids and your long-chain fatty acids. So, long-chain fatty acids are broken, they're actually a product of lipase acting on the triglycerides. But before they can be further processed, they have to be re-esterified into triglycerides and then packed into globules. And I'll show you a diagram of that later. So, chylomicrons are actually synthesized exclusively in the intestines to take care of dietary fats. Next slide, please. All right, so just repeating that difference in physical and physiological properties. Note that long-chain fatty acids, solubility in water would be less than 1 milligram per liter, much lower than the solubilities of your short-chain fatty acids and your medium-chain fatty acids. So, of course, of interest to us would be the medium-chain fatty acids. So you look at the solubilities here. They're more than 1, up to lauric acid. Of course, it depends on how the solubility is determined. So, it's very difficult to come up with a single study that would have all the values there. Next slide, please. But note the solubilities of long-chain fatty acids, very low. 1 to 10 to the minus 3, 4 times 10 to the negative 5. That's the progression is broken because of differences in the way the molecules would actually configure themselves in solution. But you look at palmitic acid, it's 4 times 10 to the negative 5. Next slide, please. All right, so this is the schematic. You will note, okay, I hope hindi mag-work. You know, if you look at the long-chain fatty acids, they have to be re-esterified into chylomicrons before they can be further circulated. But medium-chain fatty acids can go through the enterocytes and then be circulated. So that's what is meant by less processing of your MCFAs compared to your long-chain fatty acids. Next slide, please. All right. So structure function, we've talked about long-chain fatty acids being more hydrophobic. What is interesting about the hydrophobic effect is, pag sinabi natin, hindi nga tubig at langis, hindi naghahalo. So you have the nonpolar fatty acids not dissolving in water. Why does this happen? It's not because there is no affinity of your long-chain fatty acids for water. It's simply because what happens, and this is why also there is a tendency for long-chain fatty acids to form chylomicrons, is because when your long-chain fatty acids get into contact with water, the water freezes. They're sort of like ice-like in structure. So, nako-constrain sila. But nature doesn't like constraints. So, mas ordered kasi yun. Ang nature gusto natin more disordered. That's what you call the law of entropy. Ang symbol nun, S. Kanya yung isang chemist natin, the late Dr. Miranda, translated entropy as salimuot. So, sinasabi niya, when the water arrangement is random, when it's loose, then mas salimuot siya, mas gusto ng nature yon. So, ang nangyayari niyan, when your long-chain fatty acids come into contact with water, the water wants to be liberated. And it is liberated, the water molecules are liberated when you form the micelles or the chylomicrons. So makita niyo nagdidikit-dikit yung mga chains nila, So na-exclude yung water. So that doesn't happen in medium chain fatty acids. So next slide, please. And I'm sure you will hear about this in Dr. Dairit's presentation, but I will go only as far as the biochemistry of it is concerned. So there is partitioning of your fatty acids between lymphatics and your portal vein. It's very well known that your medium chain fatty acids go through the portal veins simply because your MCFAs, your medium chain fatty acids, are more soluble in aqueous systems. Ito yung polarity natin. And again, fit for purpose, structure function. Your medium chain fatty acids are actually meant to be used right away for energy. Whereas in the case of long-chain fatty acids, they're usually stored for later use in muscles, for example, and as well as in adipose or fat tissues. So, simply because your medium chain fatty acids are more hydrophilic, there is less requirement for surfactants. So, just to give an example, di ba pagka may sebo, mas madaling, pagka animal fat yun, tagal-tagal gumamit na kayo ng detergent, hindi pa rin matunaw-tunaw. And that's the nature of the long-chain fatty acids. Whereas in the case of medium-chain fatty acids, you need less detergent. Let's say if you're cooking with, with fats that are predominantly of MCFAs, you need less detergent or less surfactants. So kailangan yung mga surfactants na yun or detergents, kailangan din yun sa circulation ng fats. Next slide, please. All right. So this is the schematic. So if you follow, nandyan yung triglyceride sa top, goes through your system, and then in your enterocytes doon sa intestines, your MCFAs just go straight through the enterocytes and then go to the portal vein, blood, goes to the blood, and then for utilization for energy in the liver. Whereas your long-chain fatty acids will have to be packaged first before they go to the lymphatic system. So nagkakaroon ng, simply because of the structure, there are different requirements for the distribution of your medium chain and your long chain fatty acids. So that is the uniqueness of coconut oil. The fact that you have a lot of medium chain fatty acids will really dictate how they behave in biological systems, as well as in non-biological systems as well. So chain length has a profound effect on the physiology as well as biochemistry of your dietary lipids. Next slide, please. All right. Now, we talked about micelle formation. There is a parameter you can measure the critical micelle concentration. It takes a lot of medium chain fatty acids before you can form micelles. In fact, they resist forming micelles. But because of the chain length of long chain fatty acids, they relatively easily form aggregates, like gynomicrons as well as your micelles. So MCFAs do not readily form this structure. So they do not readily form micelles, for example. Next slide, please. So you can see, I just picked some examples. The CMC is much higher for your medium chain fatty acids compared to your long chain fatty acids. So when you deal with, let's say, emulsions of long chain fatty acids versus medium chain fatty acids, it will be hard to disperse your long chain fatty acids because of their tendency to aggregate. And this is one point I'd like to emphasize. In plants, alam nila, tomatoes, for example, okay, this is just to illustrate the principle. In tomatoes, for example, if you harvest tomatoes at noontime, the phospholipids in the membranes are mainly saturated fatty acids, saturated triglycerides. Let me do that again. It's mainly saturated fatty acids that are found in the phospholipids of membranes. But if you harvest during the cooler periods, let's say early in the morning, most of the phospholipids are actually unsaturated fatty acids. Why does this happen? Your membrane has an optimum, the membranes of the cells will have to have an optimum fluidity. So if it's too fluid, then the functions are not properly being carried out. If it's too rigid, again, also you have a problem with the functions. So yung idea that it's mainly the solidification of your coconut oil that points to adverse effects is actually not scientifically based. No? In fact, your medium chain fatty acids do not go into membranes. It's only the long chain fatty acids, mainly C14 to C24, that actually go into membranes. So hindi ma-affect yung fluidity ng membranes. In fact, merong profound effect ang medium chain fatty acids that long chain fatty acids do not necessarily perform. So, no effect of medium chain fatty acids on membrane fluidity. Next slide, please. Ito yung function na nape-perform ng medium chain fatty acids. In this particular case, the illustration is that for lauric acid. Lauric acid can actually go to membranes and even reach the nucleus so that regulation can actually be undertaken profound effects because of regulatory mechanisms can be performed by lauric acid. And this is an area of active research. Lauric acid can actually serve as a signal, and that signal will affect the biological functions of the cell. Or it can also bind with certain proteins in the membrane that actually will also mediate regulatory effects. So, medium chain fatty acids actually perform regulatory functions because of the fact that they can cross membranes and actually can also bind to regulatory proteins. Next slide, please. It's an acid, no? Both your fatty acids are acids, no? But you see, again, the acidity as well as the solubility is affected by the chain length. So if you look at the pK, pagka mataas yung pK, ang ibig sabihin nun less acidic, no? So 10 and 12, C10 and C12, apparent pK is 6.5 and 7.5 respectively. Whereas for myristic and palmitic acid, it's 8.8 and 9.15. So it's less acidic because of the predominance of your chain length. No? And this is very important for enzyme action and regulatory functions as well. No? So your pK will reflect the degree of ionization of your fatty acid. Next slide, please. All right, and this is interesting. All right, there is, in organic chemistry, sabi nila, if you oxidize organic molecules with potassium permanganate, for example, how do you balance the equation? Wala namang formal charge itong mga organic molecules, no? So, in fact, what is done is, if carbon is attached to an atom that draws the electrons, then it's given a positive charge, or presumably positive charge. But if it's connected to another carbon or to hydrogen, which actually donates or will give its electrons, will have a tendency to give its electrons to carbon, then it's assigned a negative charge. No? So positive pagka oxygen ang nakakonect sa kanya, negative pagka hydrogen or carbon. No? So when you look at what might be termed reducing equivalence, mas mataas ang reducing equivalence ng mga long-chain fatty acids. So in other words, more energy dense yung long-chain fatty acids. So it's consistent with the fact that your medium-chain fatty acids are actually utilized for energy right away. Next slide, please. And if you look practical implications, if you look at the USDA energy content of different oils, tingnan niyo ang pinakamababa, coconut. And yet they totally ignore that. No? So this, I'm not translating it in terms of health effects, but this really points out an important distinction between your medium-chain fatty acids and your long-chain fatty acids. So if you look at palm kernel oil, I just wonder how they did, they actually modified the way they calculate the energy content. So they use BAM calorimeters. But, they have actual subjects that they would look at to find out, to modify their calculations. And 833 is the lowest in this list, and that's coconut oil. Okay, so if you look at the other, particularly the animal fats, ang taas ang kanya, it's more energy dense. No? So next slide, please. So I'll stop there as far as the long chain fatty acid counterparts of your medium chain fatty acids. All right. there is some unsaturation in your coconut oil. It's only oleic acid. It's unsaturated, but there is only one double bond, which means that there is no intervening carbon atom between two double bonds, which is the case in your linoleic acid. In fact, my PhD dissertation dealt with linoleic and linolenic acid. Linoleic acid is more susceptible to sulfite oxidation. And sulfite oxidation is free radical. And this is a key difference between your saturated coconut oil and polyunsaturates. Your saturated coconut oil deteriorates mainly by hydrolytic rancidity, whereas your polyunsaturates are oxidized by free radical mechanisms. You know that free radicals, when they're generated in the body, can have a lot of adverse effects: inflammation, aging, other adverse health, physiological effects. All right. So linoleic acid has this methylene interrupted double bonds. Next slide, please. All right. So even if you have linoleic acid, it's a very low percentage of the fatty acids in coconut oil. And it's known, the dilution effect for free radical reactions is known. So because of the predominance of saturated fatty acids in coconut oil, your free radical oxidation of your linoleic acid will not progress very far, simply because it's surrounded by your saturated fatty acids. So there's less proliferation of your free radicals. In fact, the unsaturated fatty acids now face a problem commercially, because even freshly bottled polyunsaturates can have breakdown products of free radical reactions. And so one of the recommendations now as far as fish oil is, you're better off eating, let's say, fresh salmon instead of taking fish oil, because there could be oxidation, there could be free radical breakdown of your fish oil. So they're now looking to MCTs to dilute the unsaturated fatty acids. My question is, why can't we now study coconut oil to stabilize polyunsaturated fats? I'm sure we can. And, there are other interesting things as far as free radical reactions that are inhibited by coconut oil. For example, one area of study nowadays is the particulate matter that is generated during frying. And there is a difference between coconut oil and taken together with olive oil. There's a difference between that and your polyunsaturated fatty acids. So I think that's an area of research that we can undertake. For those of you, we were trying to put together a project on that, to look at the way you use coconut oil and compare the particulate matter that is generated. Compare your polyunsaturates with your coconut oil. So I'll stop there as far as the chemical uniqueness of coconut oil based on the component fatty acids, and go into an area that's also that also needs to be addressed on a scientific basis. Next slide, please. Okay. So, coconut is not a major allergen. All right. Why should we be concerned? Why should we relate this to coconut oil? Nestle, in a publication, actually looked at both refined and unrefined oils of different origins. And they looked at this specifically for the presence of proteins. because of allergies. Because anaphylaxis can actually set in only with a few molecules. So even if the protein content is very low, if it's, if it has an allergenic component, it can actually be bad for those who are sensitive to those proteins. This, there is a regulation, next slide please, from the US FDA, from the FDA website. The FDA together with USDA came up with this regulation known as FACPA. That is for the labeling of allergens. No? And this is for major food allergens. Please note the word major. No? And they include coconut oil, not the oil, but coconut. Next slide, please. All right. So you have to label it. If you want to export to the United States, be sure that you label, if it contains coconut, be sure that you actually have it in the label. Next slide, please. All right. So it's either in the list, or you may explicitly say, may contain this, even if it's cross-contamination, may contain coconut, which is an allergen. No? And that is not scientifically based. Next slide, please. All right. So again, here you see that, coconut has to be included. Otherwise, if you follow the USDA recall notices, ang daming pumapalpak because they fail to identify the allergen in their labels. Next slide, please. And you're familiar with allergic reactions. And FACPA, or USDA, points out that there are eight food groups described as major allergens. Next slide, please. Right, the previous presentations that you were looking at this morning points out that, in fact, your coconut plant is not a tree, it is a palm. So it's different. So botanically speaking, phylogenetically, it is distant from your tree nuts. Next slide, please. And yet they ignore that completely, no? So kasama yung coconut as a major allergen because they consider it as a tree nut when in fact it is not. Next slide, please. All right. So for Canada, does not consider coconut as an allergen. So they don't require labeling of coconut as an allergen. Neither do Australia and New Zealand. Next slide, please. And EU in general does not consider it as a major allergen because of the botanical distance. No? And next slide, please. And there are no reports of coconut allergy, the prevalence of coconut allergy. So it's rare in the UK, and of course, if it's rare, it's not a major allergen. Next slide, please. All right, and misdiagnosis gets into the picture, So, and cross-reactivity with other allergens, other nuts, other tree nuts has not been established. Next slide, please. All right, so even in the US, these papers are completely ignored, or at least not actually considered in identifying coconut as a major allergen. Next slide, please. All right, so even in Australia, coconut allergy is rare. Next slide, please. So the most recent labeling regulation of Australia specifically says that coconut is not included among the allergens. Next slide, please. This is the final arbiter. This is a risk analysis that was commissioned by both the WHO and the FAO. And this is part of the summary. The prevalence of coconut allergy has not been defined in unselected population, so in general, for any age group or any region. So there is no evidence for allergenic reactions to coconut. And then they point out that coconut is a monocot. And therefore, it's different from tree nuts, which are from dicots, and the likelihood, even the likelihood of cross-reactivity is diminished. So if we are to argue this case before WTO, we can actually cite this risk analysis. Next slide, please. All right. And this is an agreement among the members of WTO. No restrictive measure should be put in place unless it is science-based. No? So scientific principles should actually be the main basis. No? So science and logic. So WTO recognizes, or accepts restrictions to trade based on allergenicity, only if it's based on scientific data. Next slide, please. All right, it's the same thing. Next slide, please. So finally, when you think about it, allergenic reactions would be part of the food safety concerns. No? So what is food safety? Food safety is the assurance that when food is consumed as intended, it does not pose any unacceptable risk to human health. And that was proven by the risk analysis commissioned by the WHO and the FAO. So I'll end with that. And I hope, you've seen the uniqueness of coconut oil based on its fatty acid components, and also the uniqueness of coconut, termed as a nut, but it is not a tree nut. No, it is a fruit. And therefore, because of the botanical distance from major allergens, it is not a major allergen. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Maria Concepcion Lisada. Again, let's give Coco clap to Dr. Lisada. Ma'am. That is on her presentation, very demure, very mindful presentation on chemical uniqueness of coconut oil and biochemical implications. So guys, if you have questions, kindly send in through our QR code, which you can see on the screen, and also printed in your table, no? So all questions will be entertained during the panel discussion later. Okay? All right. So we will now proceed to our next panel speaker. To introduce our next speaker, finished his bachelor's degree in chemistry from Ateneo de Manila University, while he acquired his Master of Arts degree in chemistry and his doctorate degree in chemistry from Princeton University. He is currently a professor in the Department of Chemistry of the Ateneo de Manila University and an academician from the National Academy of Science and Technology, Philippines. He is also the president of the Integrated Chemist of the Philippines. He was awarded the Best Coconut Scientist and Outstanding Coconut Advocate during the 36th National Coconut Week for his numerous scientific studies that back up his relentless campaign for the benefits of coconut in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome with Coco Clap to our next speaker, Dr. Fabian M. Dairet.
Good morning to everyone, and yeah, I'm so pleased to be able to give my presentation to this forum on the benefits of coconut. So here I'll focus on a specific aspect of coconut. So nagbigay na ng introduction si Dr. Lizada. So hindi niyo siguro kailangan malaman ko ano yung lauric acid, but I'll focus on lauric acid. And as my title goes, lauric acid is the key to understand the unique health properties of coconut oil. Now, I'd like to emphasize, I'll focus on lauric acid. Maraming publications, and all of my citations will be based on publications. I won't touch on coconut oil. Lauric acid ang aking focus. And of course, there's half of the fatty acids in coconut oil are lauric acid. But for purposes of the evidence, I'm focusing on lauric acid. So this is my outline. Siguro bibilisan ko na lang yung una kasi nagbigay na ng magandang introduction si Dr. Lizada. And the second part will be biological activities of lauric acid. And I'll just focus on these four. Marami pang iba, but I'll just focus on these four and then ways forward. So, well, this one is from Mayo Clinic sa States. So sabi dyan, Mayo Clinic, the reason I'm starting with this is, kung nagtanong kayo sa doktor, kukuha ba ako ng coconut, sabihin, huwag kayong kumuha kasi masamahin sa inyo. And this is the video from the Mayo Clinic. He's a cardiologist, Dr. Stephen Peksky. And obviously he's saying that coconut oil is bad for you. And the reason for this really starts with this guy, Ansel Keys. He's very influential scientist in the US, and his face appeared in the Time magazine, January 13, 1961. And here he was blaming saturated fat. And if you look at all the examples niya, as Dr. Lizada said, yung saturated fat nila are all animal fats. And he linked them to heart disease. Pero nadali na lang ang coconut kasi, well, coconut is saturated fatty acids, but they're of different group as animal fats. Now, that Time magazine article is 1961. Now, this is interesting kasi this is an article, 1973 by Dr. Ian Pryor. And in his introduction, he said, the detailed study of Polynesians living within New Zealand and the Pacific offers a unique opportunity to test important hypotheses relating to some of the major problems of cardiovascular health and disease that beset so many societies in epidemic form today. This applies particularly to hypertension and coronary heart disease. So, Bale, he was based in, I think, in Singapore. Singapore. And he said, parang experiment ito kasi many Polynesians were migrating to New Zealand. So sabi niya, this is an opportunity to study yung coconut-consuming societies and what happens to them when they leave their home and adopt a different diet. So he studied two islands, itong Tokelau and Puka Puka. And they're right in the middle of the Pacific Islands, parang thousands of kilometers from the next island. So talagang isolated, and they eat a lot of coconuts. So in this first study, this is 1973, he says the high price being paid by New Zealand Maori and in terms of morbidity and mortality from a range of cardiovascular and metabolic disorders, and the contrast with the pictures seen among atoll dwellers. So these are the original in the islands. This is a clear indication of how exposure to the ways of diet and diet of Western society can influence health and disease patterns. So he was really using this as an experiment. He started this in 1973, and then he had this next publication. This is already I can't read, several years after. And this is the conclusion from that study. So The title, Studies on Fatty Acid Composition of Adipose Tissue. So he took samples from the Polynesians, and ang sabi niya dito from the paper, of the total fat intake, 80% was estimated to come from coconuts. So these people living in islands, total fat, 80% from coconuts. So just imagine that, no? And in the summary of this paper says, high intake of coconut oil by the Puka-Pukans was associated with low levels of serum cholesterol and a low incidence of atherosclerosis. So this is actually a epidemiological study that disproves what Ansel Keys was saying. Pero syempre hindi naman pinansin ng mga Amerikano ito. Now, there's actually a study. This is 1987 by Dr. Florentino and Dr. Aguinaldo at the Food and Nutrition Research Institute. They also did this study in 1987 because of the anti-coconut in the US. And they studied the intake of coconuts in the regions around the Philippines. And highlighted here is yung Bicol. So they take the highest amount of coconut in their diet. So 28, I think, percent, or I'm not sure what unit, but it's the highest. But their incidence of cardiovascular disease, myocardial infarction, and atherosclerosis was among the lowest. So even in the Philippines, this actually supports the study of Ian Pryor na kahit mataas ang intake mo ng coconut, ay hindi siya it's not related to heart disease. Now this is an interesting article because this is published by the WHO, the Western Pacific unit of WHO, and this publication, Diet, Food Supply and Obesity in the Pacific. So I just quote from this book. It says, in Rarotonga in 1957, which is around the time of Ian Pryor's study, fat provided 38 to 42% of energy. Over 64% of fat came from coconut cream, indicating that Polynesians and Micronesians may have consistently consumed a diet high in coconut fat. So it's clear. And then, next, in 1998, so how many, 40 years later, it was determined that people who were 2.2 times more likely to be obese and 2.4 times more likely to be diabetic if they ate imported fats than if they ate traditional fat sources. So it's clear here that they were getting fat and sick because of the Western diet. Because on the coconut diet, they were not. But of course, the American Heart Association ignores this evidence. Ansel Keys, whom I mentioned earlier, actually, this is an article in New York Times, 1987. In-interview siya nitong Philip Boffey. And Boffey wrote this article, Cholesterol Debate Flares Over Wisdom in Widespread Reduction. So in 1987, pinapagawa na ito. And this is a quotation from this article. They interviewed Ansel Keys, and he said, I've come to think that cholesterol is not as important as we used to think it was. So even 1987, inamin ni Ansel Keys that this cholesterol thing is not really that significant. But, the American Heart Association continued with that. Anyway, this is a paper which came out last April of this year. I co-wrote it with Dr. Mary Newport. If you don't know, Dr. Mary Newport is she's a pediatrician who used coconut oil to treat her husband with Alzheimer's. So we wrote this paper, and it's free for downloading. And here, the theme is on the title of the paper. The lipid heart hypothesis and the Keys equation, that's Ansel Keys equation, define the dietary guidelines, but ignore the impact of trans fat and high linoleic acid consumption. Here, you actually trace how Ansel Keys arrived at his conclusions. And at that time, this is the 1950s, the diet in the US is full of trans fat. And sa kanila, trans fat is solid, coconut oil is solid, so pareho lang yan. So in fact, they don't know their chemistry. Or maybe they just ignored it. But you can download this, and it's a story that you want to tell. Now, I won't dwell on this kasi nagbigay na ng introduction si Dr. Lizada. So on the left, you have the medium chain fatty acids from C6 to C12. And then on the right, you have the long chain fatty acids. These are all saturated. And so the common misconception is that all saturated fats have the same biological properties, which is wrong. And all of the studies which they cite saturated fats as being harmful are on animal fats. And this is table showing the lauric acid. Coconut oil has a lot of lauric acid. This is in milligrams per fatty acid content. So it's milligrams per 100 grams. So it's not the same as, it's a bit different from the using it percent. In percentage-wise, lauric acid is about 48 to 50%. This is in weight, but still lauric acid is the major fatty acid. Now, this is an article which differentiates long-chain saturated fat from medium-chain saturated fat. So this is C16, it's palmitic acid and stearic acid, but not lauric acid and myristic acid cause mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, what are mitochondria? Mitochondria are they convert the fats and sugars in all cells to provide energy. Kung nasira yung mitochondria, then you get sick because, this particular study studied the enterocytes, which are linings in the intestine. So if your linings in your intestine are damaged, then you won't be able to absorb the food properly. Anyway, the conclusion of the study says that palmitic acid and stearic acid, long-chain fats, induce mitochondrial dysfunction of enterocytes, that's in the gut, which cause gut inflammation, which lead to gut inflammation. So clearly, if your gut is inflamed, then it actually leads to a lot of problems because the gut is a very important organ of the body. Now, this is another article which says that lauric acid is not the same as palmitic acid. Lauric acid is a medium-chain fatty acid. Palmitic acid is a long-chain fatty acid. These two articles really just prove that you can't put all saturated fats in the same category. The lauric acid, in particular palmitic acid, have different effects. I won't go through the details because of time, but you can tell from the title of the articles, the first one, lauric acid versus palmitic acid effects on adipose tissue inflammation. Adipose tissue is your fat tissues. Insulin resistance and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in obesity. So lauric acid is a healthy saturated fat. Palmitic acid is not. So wag kayo kumain maraming palm oil. The second article, palmitic acid, but not lauric acid, induces metabolic inflammation, mitochondrial fragmentation, and drop in mitochondrial membrane, etc. So clearly, you cannot put all saturated fats in the same category. However, if you look at the many studies being done, they use palmitic acid as the classical saturated fat. That's why a lot of the articles where they do experiments on saturated fat do not apply to coconut oil because they use palmitic acid as their test fatty acid, not lauric acid. And that's actually pretty standard. So, from this first part, we must continue to show that coconut is a healthy oil and that lauric acid is a healthy saturated fat. So parang this is my first pitch. For each section, meron akong pitch. So let's go to the second part, biological activities of lauric acid. So I'll focus specifically on lauric acid. Now, this is the spectrum of published evidence. Now, if you're gonna prove something, hindi pwedeng isang experiment lang. You have to go through this, on the y-axis, you have the level of evidence. On the x-axis, you have the different types of evidence. So the higher level of evidence, the more convincing, or the more important. On the x-axis, you have in silico, this should be computer modeling and stuff. And then physicochemical principles, And then you have in vitro would be test tube studies. Ito yung mga biochem, molecular biology. And then you can take cells or organs and study them in the lab. In vivo, you start using animals, so mice or rats. And then you move to more humans. Traditional historical is basis for evidence, but epidemiology is more scientific. Parang you take populations and you study their response to diet, for example. Then you have clinical case studies, and then you have randomized clinical trials, and then meta-analysis is if you have lots of clinical trials, then you can combine them into a bigger analysis. Now, you cannot prove something if you just do one. And in fact, let's say, kahit na gumawa ka ng isang randomized clinical trial, hindi pwedeng isa lang na okay ka na. Because science, there will always be challenges to your hypothesis. So just because you say that you've proven it doesn't mean that you end there. You have to keep studying it. So that's, I think, the theme for what I'm going to say later. So for what I present, you can see what kind of studies they are. So let's look at the first one, yung antiviral activity. Now these are quite old studies, 1982, 1994, and these are in vitro studies in test tubes. And they show that here on the left, monolarin against in a cell culture against 14 human RNA and DNA lipid-coated viruses can disintegrate the virus. So this is a physical attack on the coating of the virus. And on the right, lauric acid inhibits the maturation of vesicular stomatitis virus. So it interferes with the maturation of the virus. And it shows here that lauric acid in the graph has the strongest activity against the virus. Now, these are in vitro studies. Well, the first one is actually this is the first study on using coconut oil against HIV. This was done in the yung hospital sa San Lazaro Hospital, and he presented this paper in Kerala in India in Chennai pala in the year 2000. So in 1998, the first clinical trial used coconut oil and monolarin administered to 15 HIV-infected patients for 6 months at the San Lazaro Hospital. No HIV medication was available. This is before all of these retroviral drugs. 11 of 15 patients showed higher CD4, CD8 counts, so that's the antibodies of the patients. Blood lipids and liver kidney function showed significant improvements, and only one fatality was recorded. So that is the first ever clinical study on the use of coconut oil. But this is a small number, parang pilot lang ito. There's an Indonesian group that replicated this about 15 years later, almost the same design and same results. But we haven't had any follow-up. Ngayon, mas mahirap ngayon kasi may retrovirals na. So it's going to be more expensive to actually do this study again today. Now, the interesting thing is at the bottom, this is a announcement from clinicaltrials.gov. This is a website that lists all the clinical trials being done, so you can register it here. And it says here, nakita nyo, recruiting. And this was last updated, 2023, January 18. So they're recruiting for patients, for volunteers, on a study called Efficacy of Lauric Acid, a dietary fatty acid in modifying the latent reservoir of HIV. So there's this group, this hospital in, well, I forget where this is. It's French. So they're recruiting patients to study lauric acid against HIV. So some work is continuing on the use of lauric acid against HIV. Well, during COVID, we, FNRI, did 2 clinical studies. The first one in Santa Rosa City from July to November 2020. So COVID started, well, it was declared March 2020. So this is only a few months after that was declared. At this time, wala pang vaccines. And these were on, it's important to note, these were among suspect and probable cases of COVID-19. So early onset ng infection with COVID-19. The second one, almost similar design, it was done in Valenzuela City, 2021, almost the same time, same months, around October. Also, COVID-19 positive results. Pero may vaccine na nito, but the patients here were not vaccinated. Anyway, if you can see the graph in the middle is the number of days to relief of symptoms, and both studies show that the sickness or relief of symptoms was faster with VCO than without. And then yung C-reactive protein, which is a measure of inflammation, went down faster also with VCO. So in both studies, just shown that at least in mild cases, VCO is effective. Now recently, UP PGH published this actually just a few weeks ago. VCO, virgin coconut oil, is adjunctive therapy for hospitalized COVID-19 patients in a tertiary referral hospital, a randomized controlled trial. Now, they gave VCO, but I note here that there was no adjustment period for intake of VCO. Kung di ka nag-VCO, wag kang kumuha ng 3 tablespoons on day 1. You have to do it slowly. Kasi sasakit talagang tiyan mo. Especially if you don't cook with coconut oil. So, one of the major complaints was people got upset stomach kasi walang trial period eh. And then, walang adjustment period. But the second important one is that they gave the VCO to severe and critical COVID cases were included. So in the table, you can see that at the bottom 2 lines, andun yung severe tsaka critical. The majority of patients, there were 17 and 17 out of about 30. So more than half were severe and critical patients. Yung mga mild, which was the FNRA studies on mild cases, ito mild nila isa lang, moderate 10. But even though they gave it, this was the study was done on severe and critical patients, still the VCO was shown to work. Although there were some who withdrew kasi sumakit yung tiyan. So that's why parang that was one of the complaints of the patients. But it's clear that even in severe and critical cases, the VCO does have some efficacy. But certainly if you're mild, VCO was positive in case of efficacy. So, yung takeaway nito, antiviral, we must show how coconut oil and lauric acid can combat our present and future viral threats. Maraming viral threats. Of course, just because it's a virus doesn't mean that VCO will work or lauric acid. You still have to do the clinical study, but we have to continue to do that. So we have 2 successful or 3 successful studies. We can't just stop there. We have to continue. So ito yung antiviral. So we go to the second one, antibacterial. Now bacteria also have membranes. Although merong you have 2 kinds of bacteria, gram-positive, gram-negative. Lauric acid works better against the gram-positive bacteria. So these are both clinical studies. The first one in 1984, the one on the left, antimicrobial agents derived from fatty acid, and that was lauric acid. And then the paper on the right, glycerol monolaurate, which is monolaurin, antibacterial activity in broth and biofilm culture. So these are in vitro studies. Now this is a list of antibacterial activity of lauric acid and its derivatives. Most of these are in vitro. But you can see that the number of bacteria against which VCO has been studied is actually quite large. I'd like to point out itong Helicobacter pylori, din ang bacteria for ulcers. So ulcers is actually a bacterial infection, and VCO works for that. And the other significant one would be itong MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which is a problem because yun nga, it's resistant to common antibacterial agents. And then a lot of Staphylococcus. So lauric acid is effective against these bacteria. Now these are two separate citations. They're on animal studies. Now, sabi mo, kahit na animal studies, what's the importance? Well, it's important because we put a lot of antibiotics on animals. Kaya nagkakaroon ng spread ng bacterial yung drug resistance because we give too many antibiotics to animals, to pigs, to chicken. Yung sa kaliwa, it's on poultry. So antimicrobial monoglycerides for swine, pigs, and poultry applications. So in a way, you can say that, di ba, they do animal studies. In a way, this is an animal study. Kasi kung di naman namatay yung baboy, hindi naman mamatay yung tao. Although that's, of course, you don't do it that way. But still, it's important because you can minimize the spread of antibiotic-resistant bacteria if you use monoglycerides. This one would be monolaurin. The right is a European patent. Antimicrobial composition containing lauric acid and method for their production. So in Europe, this is from Cargill, they filed this patent using lauric acid in animals. So yun. This is just introduction to the gut microbiota. I mentioned earlier that the gut is important. This is an article, Role of the Gut Microbiota in Nutrition and Health. So there are many aspects. It's very important for inflammation, the system. So one of the key messages is that gut microbiota influences many areas of human health, from innate immunity to appetite and energy metabolism. So you really have to take care of your gut microbiota. And that's significant because of this paper by a Japanese. What they did was they were measuring antimicrobial activity in the gut. And what they found out is very interesting. They said in their conclusion, lauric acid has low antibacterial activity against commensal lactic acid bacteria, meaning the friendly bacteria, but high antibacterial activity against pathogenic bacteria, in particular Bacteroides and Clostridium, suggesting that lauric acid might modulate intestinal health. Now, this is a very important paper because parang may selectivity ang lauric acid. So we don't know the mechanism. The mechanism would be very interesting. How would lauric acid choose that a bacterium is good or bad? So I think that's a very important thing to study. So take away from this, we should study the direct and synergistic antibacterial properties of coconut oil and lauric acid, especially against antibiotic-resistant bacteria. I guess in particular, if you want to study the ones in the gut, that would be very interesting. Gut microbiota is very difficult to study because there are thousands of species of bacteria in the gut. Third would be anti-inflammatory. So inflammation is the body's response to injury. So you need inflammation. Kung nasaktan ka, you're injured, then you have inflammation. But if inflammation continues for a long time, then it's a disease. So many of the anti-inflammatory properties of lauric acid may be related to its antiviral and antibacterial properties, and or may involve the mitigation of metabolic dysfunction. So inflammation is a more complex disease or occurrence. This is an article, Antibacterial and Anti-Inflammatory Properties of Capric Acid. Capric acid is C10 against Propionibacterium acnes. I guess that's skin. So we just go to the results. Lauric acid has stronger antimicrobial activity against this bacterium, than capric acid. So lauric acid better than capric acid in vitro and in vivo. Both fatty acids significantly reduced IL-6. These are inflammatory markers, and IL-8, which inhibited activation of kinases. Anyway, the take-home message here is that lauric acid has significant activity against this bacterium, and it's for affects inflammation. Now, lauric acid supports healthy mitochondrial function. I mentioned earlier that mitochondria is one of the is a powerhouse of a cell. So the picture there is that's the cell. You have several mitochondria there, and mitochondria provide the energy for the cell. And if the mitochondria is damaged or what they call dysfunctional, then you have a lot of health problems like diabetes, heart disease, aging, neurological diseases, among others. And this article, lauric acid alleviates insulin resistance by improving mitochondrial biogenesis. So lauric acid is good for mitochondria. It's a basic need for the body. So a lot of diseases are caused by mitochondrial dysfunction. So it's important to take care of mitochondria. And lauric acid is good for the mitochondria. The mechanism should be studied further. Lauric acid is also good against Alzheimer's. So these are studies from some Japanese. Lauric acid alleviates neuroinflammation responses by activated microglia. So the summary is that lauric acid alleviates amyloid beta-induced phagocytosis, which may reduce neuronal damage in Alzheimer's disease patients who consume coconut oil. So there, it's related to the activity of lauric acid and against inflammation. So we should study the inflammatory properties of coconut oil and lauric acid in the complex interactions of the immune system. So again, this is a difficult area to study, but it's something which very promising for lauric acid. Now we go to lauric acid and its anti-cancer properties. Now there are many causes of cancer, so we can't say that there's not just one drug for cancer. So what I put the arrows on are the types of cancer for which lauric acid might be effective. So that's number 2, induces apoptosis triggering programmed cell death in cancer cells. So apoptosis is what they call programmed cell death. So what you want if you're a cancer cell, you want the cancer cell to die, but your healthy cells not to die. And that's where lauric acid might help. And then number 7, modulates energy metabolism to strengthen healthy cells. Again, if you talk about energy metabolism, you're talking about the mitochondria. So these are 2 studies. The lauric acid activated signaling prompts apoptosis in cancer cells. So lauric acid, C12, is believed to be responsible for the improvement of the quality of life in breast cancer patients who take coconut oil during chemotherapy. Lauric acid increases reactive oxygen species which induce apoptotic cell death. So it's specific to kill cancer cells. Of course, the usual one is remove the sugar and take fat. Fat would be lauric acid. And then the second article, induction of apoptosis by medium chain length fatty lauric acid. So it's the same, in this case, they were comparing butyric acid, C4, against lauric acid, C12, and that lauric acid was more effective. So, I guess instead of taking chemotherapy, it kills a lot of cells. But with lauric acid, it's more specific to cancer cells. This is another article also on colon cancer cells. Maraming may colon cancer ngayon. And here, again, it's energy metabolism. Here comparing ketone bodies with lauric acid. So these are some studies which focus on the efficacy of lauric acid against cancer. So we must show how coconut oil and lauric acid can help maintain healthy cells and combat cancer. So, ways forward. Well, this is a table, various biomedical applications of lauric acid. So this is a list of things which, we should study to further the use, study the effect of lauric acid. And of course, later on, we can translate that to VCO. So there's quite a lot. Implications in the nervous system, cardiovascular, anti-diabetic, hypolipidemic, blood pressure, anti-tumor, liver protection, neuroinflammation, antimicrobial activity. So quite a lot. So these are the health products from the coconut fruit. Right now, we're just talking about VCO and lauric acid. But if we want to really support, the health products from coconut fruit, there are a lot of things you can study. You have coconut milk, you have nata de coco, coconut water. I think there was a presentation yesterday, cocoa flour. Yung testa of the, could also be studied, maraming phenolics testa. So although I talked mainly about coconut oil and lauric acid, there are actually many things that can be studied on products from the coconut fruit, edible products from the coconut fruit. So going back to this graph, we really have to go up the, study the various aspects. Hindi pwedeng isa lang. We have to study the rest. Even though you have positive clinical trial, they'll always ask you why, what's the basis. So that's when you go to the theory and models, because you have to tie in the theory with the effect. Hindi pwedeng gumaling, okay na yon. Kailangan ipagpaliwanag mo, especially to scientists, why does it work? And that's where the theories and models are important. So it's like climbing up the evidence pyramid. You have to go up this to get to where we want to get to. So I just quote from Genesis. Just as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. So they gave us the coconut palm. Sige, thank you.
All right. Maraming salamat po, Dr. Direct, sir. May we kindly, sir, respectfully ask you to occupy our seat in front for the panel discussion segment. We would like also to request Dr. Lisada, with your kind indulgence, ma'am, and Ms. Rose Villaruel to please join Dr. Direct for our discussion or panel discussion segment. All right, again, please send in your questions through our QR code as shown on the screen or you can see on your table. You may also scan that, no? May I now turn over the floor to Ms. Rose Villaruel.
Good morning, everyone. We are so blessed to have these two chemists here. When I was in college, I was recruited to take up BS Chemistry, but I did not because I've seen how difficult it was. So, very thankful. So, first question. This is addressed to Dr. Lizada. Are there significant differences between regular coconut oil and virgin coconut oil in terms of their chemical and biochemical properties?
If we're talking about the effect of lauric acid, both have lauric acid. And in fact, when we still had the coconut oil task force, somebody working on sepsis in children, said there are very good effects of VCO, but it's the poor who actually are very vulnerable to sepsis. So she asked whether we can use coconut oil. If it's mainly lauric acid effect, of course, the two are the same. However, in our study of VCO, we actually found out there are traces of proteins in VCO, just like in other unrefined oils. No? So there could be some minor components that could make a difference, but thus far we have not. Well, the lipases are there, and therefore some of the active components like your monoglycerides and diglycerides could actually be, the contents between VCO and RBD could be different. So, but we really need to document. In fact, you did see differences in di and monoglycerides. Monoglycerides. So these are bioactive components. So there are. One would expect it's plausible that you do have differences in those minor components. Of course, the triglycerides are the primary components, but some, that's the thing about regulatory molecules. Like, for example, lauric acid is a regulatory molecule, and it doesn't take much for a regulatory molecule to make a difference. So I think, that's a question in relation to health that we should look more closely at. So, but anyway, I think Dr. Dairit has first-hand information on the differences that they've seen between VCO and RBD.
Dr. Dairit, would you provide some more?
Well, what Dr. Rizado said is basically correct. If you take it in by mouth, there probably is no very little difference except if you have mga phenols. Because when you take it in, your lipases will break them down anyway to monolaurin and lauric acid. I think some of the problems is when they do in vitro studies. Hindi pwedeng in vitro study yan eh. Kasi you don't have lipases in the in vitro study. But in general, they should be mainly the same.
Okay, thank you. So here's another question for Dr. Concepcion. If Canada, UK, and Australia has accepted that coconut is not a major allergen, what will it take for the US FDA to finally follow and revise their position? Unconventional idea, what if the entire industry start renaming and calling them coconut fruit instead of coconut?
I think it will help to emphasize, if you label it as coconut fruit. But you see, even Codex recognizes traditional names. Coconut milk, they're very restrictive about using the term milk. And yet, coconut milk is accepted in Codex because of the traditional use of the term. Should we depart from coconut or, maybe really approach it on a scientific basis? These countries have actually, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and countries in EU have accepted the fact, and they've used scientific data to indicate that, in fact, coconut is not a major allergen. But nevertheless, there is this dispute with the United States. And remember, WTO says that whatever regulations you put out that tend to restrict trade should really be scientific and should be risk-based. And this is why the commissioned study the risk analysis that was commissioned by WHO and FAO is the final arbiter. Because if we just communicate, if we emphasize the results of that risk analysis, it will erode confidence in the science-based regulations, supposedly science-based regulations of the United States. Saturated fat is one issue. Is it, when they lump coconut oil with animal fats, what's the scientific basis? So it's, but in the case of allergens, there's already a risk-based analysis. And the WTO will recognize that. The way they do risk analysis in WHO, FAO, is they commission experts internationally. And they would have several meetings and decide whether, in fact, their conclusions actually will hold. So that document coming from the joint document from WHO, FAO, should be the final arbiter. So use that risk analysis.
Okay, go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, suggestion ko, we should stop calling it coconut. Tawag natin coco fruit, tapos coco palm.
Yes. Actually, you have started calling it coconut palm instead of coconut tree. So, can I have a follow-up question?
Coco palm
for
na,
that
wala
process?
nang nut. Coco palm,
Coco palm.
saka coco fruit.
Yes. I think the PCA board members are here. They're the sources of policies. Regarding the naming of the coconut fruit under WTO or the Codex, are there processes to undertake that?
In the first place, Codex will tell you, we accept it because it is traditional. It is used traditionally. It's not, in this case, in the case of coconut, why, the way I see it, why change it? But I think we need to emphasize the fact that it is not a nut, but the name is traditional, but it is a fruit. But do we change the name?
Yeah.
Coconut fruit.
Yeah.
Coco fruit. Coco fruit. What is coco fruit?
Yeah.
Sanayan
Just
lang
have
yan.
to emphasize and educate our consumers. Okay. There are 3 questions for Dr. Dairit here. Number 1, ano po ang recommended dose of VCO as preventive application? Second, even sa studies specifically referring to Pacific locations, would it be fair to say that even dagata works wonder kahit hindi pa VCO?
Yeah, of course. In fact, yung the usual recommendation is mga 45 ml, 3 tablespoons day. That was calculated during the 1980s. Tinignan nila yung diet ng mga Bicolano. And then they estimated, this is how much coconut they put in their food. Pas din lumabas yung So it wasn't a scientific study. It was from traditional ingestion. So, if you take it in your diet, it's the same as taking VCO. Yung VCO, syempre nakahiwalay lang. And if you really want to measure it. But really, VCO it's a food supplement. Parang food. Pwede mo ibalik sa pagkain mo yan.
So it's the same VCO na nasa gata.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Maybe, basta coconut oil would be in the, nasa gata yan.
Yeah, okay. This is still for Dr. Dairit. Is there a potential for coconut oil to be associated or applied to probiotics studies and development such as in the droplet encapsulation and microencapsulation despite of being streamlined for its antimicrobial properties?
Well, I don't know. There's a specific definition of probiotic. So I don't know whether the fatty acids in coconut oil would qualify as probiotics. like, fiber, and then, so there's a specific definition for those. Usually, they're there to feed the gut microbiota. Baka pwede, but I guess that has to be worked on by the mga food science. So sina Dr. Lizada ang mag-aaral niyan.
Yeah, okay. Any word from the food scientist?
No, it's really the constraint. The constraint is really the definition of probiotics. And, probiotics are supposed to generate short chain fatty acids, which are beneficial. And it's done by this microbiota. No, but it's really mainly the fiber. No, like for example, if you take one of the powdered milk products, they add inulin, no, and that's supposed to be a probiotic. It's a fiber again, no. So I guess we'd have to have a wider definition later of what a probiotic is, no. And in fact, one of the beneficiaries of the health effects of coconut in animals is really the livestock industry, because now they're moving away. As was pointed out by Dr. Dairit, it would be interesting to see what Denmark is doing, because Denmark really pioneered in making sure they use less or no, they don't use prophylax. They don't use antibiotics as prophylactics. They use it therapeutically at a certain age and then withdraw it. Denmark has been really very good at trying to minimize the use of antibiotics. So the animal industry is really now interested in using such products as coconut products. In fact, I think one of the reasons, of course, you're familiar with copra meal as imported for animal feeds. Of course, they're saying that, the cattle, for example, likes copra meal. But I think there are other effects that are obtained from copra meal, for as long as there are no mycotoxins.
Pwedeng research yan.
Yeah, I fully agree. Those are research areas that we'll undertake. And please, somebody put that in our survey for our pledge of commitment later. So another question here, maybe we limit to 2 questions. And may we know the panelists' thought on medium chain triglycerides, MCTs? Are they just a marketing strategy? Oh, there's science behind it.
Well, the term's been used since 1980s. But the original medium chain triglycerides, originally, this was 1960s when we were exporting coconut oil to the US. They took away the C12 kasi ginagamit na sabon yun. One of the best soap is C12. You have sodium dodecyl sulfate and it's actually the most efficient surfactant in terms of for cleaning for surfactant for soap, mga ganon. So natira yung mga C8 and C10. And then they experimented with that and they found it's a good for energy. So it became used in hospitals and then used by athletes. And they called that medium chain fatty acids. So the term medium chain fatty acid was initially a commercial term applying to C8 and C10. But then scientifically, if you have some criteria on its metabolic behavior, sinama yung C12. So the question is whether it's it's not a marketing term. It's a real term. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I'm interested in something that Dr. Dairit pointed out, that in fact lauric acid, this is in vitro ba? Yung Helicobacter. pylori study.
Yeah.
I wonder, because Helicobacter pylori also is responsible for the transformation of ulcers into cancer cells. No, I wonder if any study has been done to prevent the progression of ulcers caused by Helicobacter to gastric cancer.
No, actually, I don't know whether it's purely in vitro. Baka merong in vivo, but maybe in rats. I don't know if there's any clinical study. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's an area we still need to know. And then there's our last question. Would there be a difference between processed coconut milk versus freshly squeezed coconut milk?
Take a look at the process. But in general, kung wala namang ginawang extensive, it should be the same.
Yes. So, thank you. Anybody from the audience would like to ask few more questions? Maybe we can entertain 3 more. Yes, madam.
Good morning, everyone. Ako po si Josefina Simbahan Sabares from Coco Plus Aquarium Development Corporation. Natutuwa po ako sa symposium na to dahil kahapon pa po ako excited. Kasi po, ang aming mission sa aming company is to have a healthy Filipino family. Talagang ang target namin ay Pilipino na makinabang sa kagandahan ng virgin coconut oil. Pangalawa po, pagka naging successful tong coconut product, marami pong mabibigyan ng trabaho. At kapag bibigay po ng maraming trabaho, uulad po ang ating bansa. Kaya yung tatlong yung po, doon kami nakapokus na gusto namin ipaalam sa lahat ng tao ang kagandahan ng virgin coconut oil. Kasi po, sa aming company, marami po ang nagpatotoo na talaga yung mga impossible na gumaling po. Yung mga diabetes na mapuputol na yung paa dahil sa sugat, gumaling. Yung mga may Hepa B, gumaling. Yung may cancer na hindi po chemo, gumaling. At maraming pa totoo. Kaya ganun na lang po kami ng aking kapatid na sa pagpapakilala ng virgin coconut oil sa maraming tao. Pero ang naging problema po, marami pang ayaw maniwala. Kasi mismo ang doktor po ang nagsasabi na bawal dahil nga may cholesterol daw. In fact, meron po akong kaibigan na asawa ng doktor. Yung kaibigan ko po, paniwalang-paniwala kasi very effective po sa kanya. Nung makaksidente po ang kanyang asawa na sugatan, lalagyan niya ng virgin coconut oil, ayaw po nung doktor na yun. Sabi ng asawa, very effective yan sa sugat, pero ayaw pa maniwala. Kaya sabi ko, ang problema talaga ng mga manufacturer ng virgin coconut oil ay ang mga doktor na ayaw maniwala. Kasi kung ang mga doktor po ang unang naniniwala at inaano nila, napakadami pong gamit ang virgin coconut oil. Una-una po kami na-inspired sa libro po ni Dr. Conrado Dairit na tinawag na po itong drugstore in a bottle. Na kung titignan mo po lahat, ang mga sakit halos lahat nandun. At yung kay Dr. Bruce Pipe, talaga pong kami po talagang advocate ng virgin coconut oil. Ngayon ang tanong ko po, kung mangyayari po na ito ay maging necessity sa ating mga Pilipino, marami pong uunlad. Possible po ba na maging necessity ito, katulad ng alcohol, naging necessity, katulad ng mga bagay na naging necessity, without it, you cannot live without it. Parang ganun po. Possible po ba na maging necessity itong virgin coconut oil dahil sa dami ng mga health benefit? From head to foot, internal and external.
Okay, thank you for that question. Anyone of you who would like to answer?
Kalaban talaga natin yan. Kaya nagsimula ako dun sa sa doktor. I start my presentation kasi yun naman ang miseducated kasi. I mean, kasi our medical curriculum comes from the US and yun ang sinasabi sa kanila. So I think, well, we have to address this head on with the medical curriculum. Tama ba yung kanilang sinasabi? So perhaps this is something which the PCA can pilot, really addressing the evidence, because there's a lot of evidence that it's wrong. Mali talaga. But it's a economic sa states kasi they're protecting their own soy products. So yeah, I think it has to be addressed head on, and what's the evidence for this, and we can do it here. We can't do it in the States kasi hindi naman tayo makapag-usap dun eh.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, hindi lang sa Pilipinas. Coconut oil is a pan-tropical we should talk to the international coconut community and see whether we can have a strategy for reversing the misinformation that they have.
Okay. Pwede bang sumagot ang hindi chemist? Well, my take on that, ang tanong, pwede ba itong maging necessity? Then that's why we are here. We are trying to disseminate the information, and it's up for the consumer to decide maganda pa ito sa kanya o hindi. Our role is to disseminate the information na tama, factual, and onwards we will establish the scientific basis of what we will say about our products. Then second, Madam, we would like to document yung mga nabanggit niyo po na gumaling, and then we will disseminate the information. We would be grateful to get the details of those clients. Yes, ma'am. Mag-usap po tayo later. Then, Madam, go
Actually,
ahead.
meron namang doktor na naniniwala sa coconut eh. So I think what you would do is to identify these doctors. So sila mismo ang magdadiagnose ng mga sinasabi niyang may diabetes. Kasi kung yung nanay lang yung nagsabi, siyempre hindi maniniwala. You have to have need a medical professional to give the diagnosis. Pero meron namang doktor na naniniwala. And I think the more doctors we can convince, then the better it is.
Yes, that's why we invited some medical practitioners to be with us today, and we will start from them. So, Madam, go ahead.
Yeah, if you invited the doctors, may I find out who among us? Saan po sila dito? Kasi, okay, why do I ask? Because truly, I agree with Doc Toby. There are doctors who know the benefits of VCO. As a matter of fact, before the pandemic, we were supposed to conduct a study of VCO on cancer patients together with PGH. But of course, COVID happened, so that's put on hold. However, again, and I appeal to everyone here, because I believe we should be discussing this with DOH, especially with Secretary Herbosa. I believe we have an opportune time to talk to them and listen to this. Di ba po, Doc Toby? Kasi kailangan namin kayo. Pag kinausap namin sila, kasi magkakaintindihan kayo. Diba? So, I would like to appeal to PCA if together with industry and our researcher, Doc Toby and Doc Connie, I'm sure they would understand what we're saying and knock some sense into them, no? Because our industry cannot just talk about it. And we have been espousing promotions of and information dissemination of all these benefits. But how many are we in this room?
we should have a bigger audience. for
Yes,
what
ma'am.
We
I
learn.
fully agree with that. And yesterday, we also mentioned that this is just the initial. After this, we will have our priorities lined up, and then we will schedule our activities, and then maybe talking to DOH would be our top priority as a next undertaking. Yes, madam?
Yes, definitely there are doctors who believe in coconut oil. In fact, Med City, I know they use it for preterm infants as well as infants who might need, a boost in their nutrients. If you follow developments I think we should promote some of the developments, let's say in Australia, for infants, particularly for infants, no, where the dermal system is not completely developed. They actually use coconut oil. Well, in addition, as a dietary component, I really would like to have studies on the stability of coconut oil versus polyunsaturated oils. Because they're really, lo and behold, I'm trying to look for a paper or a number of papers that I saw before that really caution against polyunsaturated or not, or give the caution that one should ensure that the polyunsaturated oils that you get are freshly packaged, because they're prone to oxidation. And then the other thing is, and it's interesting because there are some studies, but I don't think they've actually designed it in such a way to highlight the merits of coconut oil. It's the particulates that come from frying. And the particulates are supposed to increase when the cooking oil is actually prone to free radical oxidation.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a specific suggestion for PCA.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
PCA ang member ng representative ng Pilipinas sa International Coconut Community. Ngayon, coconut, and actually, puro mga agriculture to. Yung PCA is really agriculture. International Coconut Community is really agriculture. I suggest that PCA recommend to International Coconut Community to hold a conference specifically on the medical aspects of coconut oil. So, yun ang focus. And then we gather it from international speakers. Australia, we talk about the medical health benefits of coconut.
Okay, sir, I fully agree with that, and it will be a priority. So we'll have our last question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Buenos dias. I am Dr. Abdul Jabbar Esturco from Zamboanga City Medical Center.
Here's our doctor.
So, I was thinking with all those topics that we have yesterday and today, naisip ko na dapat malaki ang audience na na-invite natin for that, for those topics. And I was talking with I'm part of the Philippine College of Lifestyle Medicine. So basically, this new branch of medicine believes that our non-communicable diseases, that would be your hypertension, your diabetes, your metabolic X, of course, your dyslipidemia, lahat na discuss natin kahapon and today, are caused by the lifestyle that we have and of course the food that we take in. Now, I'm talking with the national officers, why not, sabi ko, invite PCA and siguro Dr. Dairit also. I was sending the pictures of the topics. Sabi niya, sige, kausapin mo sino yung point person. So, really, you felt that there is a need that the medical community has to know about this, and like since ako lang yata nasa medical community, I also saw na dapat makita rin ito ng, especially the Filipino physicians, no, that although that yung question ni Ma'am kanina na could we increase, no, siguro yung utility ng coconut products in healthcare industry. Of course, we could do that, no? Because the sustainability nandoon, syempre we're talking about climate change, and that healthcare also has to be addressing that. And of course, we could help an industry, no? Locally, na of course that would good repercussions, no, to our economy. And I think tama na dapat magkaroon ng avenue in which the healthcare professionals has to know all of this information. Like for example, yung lauric acid, we know na kasi basic sa mga, for example, doctors, they would say, we would be recommending the PUFA versus the saturated. And like ngayon, na-realize ko, that's why pa there are articles that says that coconut oil is not saturated, although they lump it as part of the saturated fat cluster, pero it behaves differently. And I think that has to be communicated to the medical community. Perhaps this year, kasi may convention kami, and I think willing ang committee for the accommodation of topics on that. Mag-usap tayo later, ma'am.
Yes, of course. We've been
Thank you
soliciting
po.
your
Thank you.
input since yesterday and also your commitment. So I think that's the last question. I may now give it
Alright.
back to our...
All right, maraming salamat po. And that concludes our segment, no, for the panel discussion. It's truly a coconut nut is a giant nut. Di ba may kanta niyan?
coconut fruit.
All right, may we request our resource speakers to stay on stage for the awarding of the Certificate of Appreciation. To award the Certificates of Appreciation, may we call on stage again Ma'am Rose Villaruel on stage, as well as our former directors representing the Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, Dr. Flor Olivar, Director Flor Olivar, Director Frank Roy Ribo, and Director Pipito Kapangpangan. With your kind indulgence po. As I read the citation, Department of Agriculture, Philippine Coconut Authority presents the Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Fabian M. Dairit for sharing his expertise as a resource speaker on the topic, Lauric Acid, the Key to Understanding the Unique Health Properties of Coconut Oil during the Symposium on the Benefits of Coconut Products held at the Philippine International Convention Center, Pasay City, Philippines on August 29-30th, 2004. Given this 30th day of August 2004 at the PICC Pasay City. Signed, Dexter R. Butid, Administrator. Palakpakan po natin. Another Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Maria Concepcion Lisada for sharing her expertise as a resource speaker on the topic, the chemical uniqueness of coconut oil and biochemical implications. Let's give a warm round of applause. All right, let's have a photo opportunity po. Okay po. Sige po, sa camera po. A count of 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay. Smile. Okay, maraming salamat po. Once again, our resource speakers, let's give a warm round of Coco Club. All right, and that concludes our morning session. We will have our short break, no, for our lunch, and we will resume at around 1 p.m. while waiting for our lunch, may we invite, or you may visit, no, our mini coconut product showcase located outside at this venue. Maraming salamat po. All right. Guys, I know that this is not part of the program, but the Coco Week Organizing Committee proudly presents to you our special guest, the brand ambassador of Minola Premium Cooking Oil, Mr. Joshua Garcia.
Showtime. Guess who's back again? Oh, they don't know. Oh, they don't know. I bet they know as soon as we walk in. I'm wearing Cuban links, designer mix, Inglewood's
Oh, ba't may decide kayo? Again!
Heart might hurt yourself. Known to give the color red the blues. Woo, shit. I'm a dangerous man with some money in my pocket. Keep up.
Uy, andito po ako, Joshua Garcia. Joke lang.
Why you mad? Fix your face. Ain't my fault they all be jocking. Keep up. Players only. Come on, put your pinky rings up to the moon. Girls, what y'all trying to do? 24 karat magic in the air. Head to toe, so player. Look out. 24 karat magic, magic. Bad bitches and your ugly ass friends. I cannot preach, I cannot preach. I gotta show them how a pimp get it in. First, take your sip, do your dip, spend your money like money ain't shit. Ooh, ooh. Got to blame it on Jesus.
All right. Please welcome again our special guest, the brand ambassador of Minola Premium Cooking Oil. No other than Mr. Joshua Garcia. Let's give a warm round of Coco Clap.
Hello everyone! Magandang tanghali. Tanghali na pala. Magandang tanghali po sa inyo lahat. Salamat sa Minola. Thank you for having me. And kamusta? Okay naman kayo lahat? Okay naman? Alright.
Yes, thank you, Joshua. No? Thank you for gracing this event, no, despite your very hectic, busy schedule. You have time here to grant, no, our participants here in our Coco Week celebration. This is actually our two-day symposium. No? Our participants here are from different sectors, from government, non-government organizations. We also have our coconut farmers, our processors, among others.
Hi. Hello. Shy type.
Well,
hello.
basically, Joshua, congratulations, no, on your very successful movie. No, we heard that it earned 250 million box office hit. Congratulations.
Actually, ano na siya, 320.
Oh, palakpakan. Coco clap naman dyan. No? So, Joshua, can you tell us
Pero sayang, hindi naman napupunta sa akin yung pera.
Can you tell us about the movie?
Yung movie, it's a story about Wancho and Zai. May nakapanood na ba dito? Sorry. Oh my God, okay. So, storya siya ni Wancho and ni Zai. Ang background ng character ko, may ari ako ng isang restaurant sa Bicol. So, isa akong chef dito. Puro luto, ganyan. Dami ko nga natutunan ng mga Bicolano food. Natuto ako magluto ng Bicol Express, ng laing, ng mga tinoktok. Tsaka yung favorite ko, yung kinalas. Yan. Yeah. Ayan.
Okay, speaking of movie, how was it working with Julia again?
Ano ba? It was a very nostalgic experience for me. Kasi syempre, nagkatrabaho na rin kami before eh. So, yan, in-enjoy ko lang yung process, yung journey namin sa pelikula. Yeah. Ayan na, may pa-background music na si Kuya.
Yan na, oh.
Ayun, yeah. And ngayon, parehas kaming masaya sa lahat na nangyayari. Diba? Kasi kinakabahan din kami sa pagbabalik namin tambalan, diba? Pero ngayon, sa lahat na nangyayari ngayon, we're very proud sa buong team ng Unhappy For You. Yeah.
Okay, walang spoilers to sa gitna po tayo, sir. Okay.
Sige.
For those who have not yet watched, wala. Well, anyway, ano pong nabanggit nyo kanina na marami kayong natutunan, nag-aaral kayo, nag-chef din kayo, di ba? Doon sa movie nyo. So, anong favorite mong lutuin?
Favorite ko lutuin dati, nung hindi pa ako artista sa Batangas. Taga Batangas po kasi ako. Puro fried eh. So, yun yung palang kaya ko lutuin at that time eh. Kasi yung mga mahihirap na luto, usually nasa likod, nasa behind the scenes lang ako eh. Ako yung taga-gaya, taga-gano'n lang, pero hindi ako yung nagluluto. Yung lola ko tsaka yung tatay ko. Pero ngayon na nag-aral na ako, hilig ako sa pasta. Na-appreciate ko yung art sa pagluluto ng pasta. Mahilig din ako sa fried food. So, nagluluto ako ng tonkatsu. Mahilig kasi ako sa mga Japanese food eh. So, ayun. Yeah, mga ganong pagkain, mga ganong klaseng pagkain. And then ngayon, natutunan ko nga yung mga Bicol Express laing. Nandun na ako ngayon. So, back to Filipino food.
Okay, so nabanggit mo kanina, puro fried yung niluluto mo dati, gamit yung minola oil.
Yes. Yun na nga. Actually, nung kinuha ko ng minola, gulat ako kasi sabi ko, bakit ako? Diba? Kasi dati nakikita ko lang siya sa kusina namin. Tapos biglang ako na yung mukha. Diba? It's something na iba rin yung pakiramdam ng kinuha ko. Kaya thank you and sana may next contract.
Ayun, nagpaparinig, sir.
Joke lang.
So, Joshua, since cooking yung pinag-uusapan natin, how did you feel when Minola tapped you as their brand ambassador?
Ayun na nga. Nung una, na-shocked ako talaga kasi parang hindi ako bagay. Pero nung pinakita sa akin yung campaign, sabi ko, excited akong gawin to. And I'm very grateful lang talaga. Masaya ako na at the time din kasi ang daming blessings na pumapasok. And Minola is one of those blessings na pumasok sa akin. And kaya, thank you for trusting me. Maraming salamat.
So, ulit, anong nagustuhan mo sa Minola?
Nagustuhan ko sa Minola? Okay.
What stood you out as well?
3 things. First, premium quality. Alam naman natin na premium quality ang Minola. Second, meron tong lauric acid that helps boost immunity.
Kakabanggit lang yan kanina.
Bonus, no cholesterol. Bonus na yan, ha. Third, gawang Pilipino. Gawang Pilipino. At dahil coconut oil yung pinanggagalingan, marami tayo natutulungan mga coconut farms sa Pilipinas. Ayan po.
Ano yung message mo sa ating mga coco farmers? Sila yung nagpo-produce.
Thank you. Maraming salamat. Thank you for supporting Minola, of course. And manood kayo ng movie.
Okay. So, I've also heard na nagdala kayo ng Minola products para i-raffle. Oh, meron ba?
Yes,
meron.
oo nga. Yeah. Meron atang ilang winners.
So, namili si Joshua ng 10 winners at
10 winners.
ngayon ay i-announce niya na. Si Joshua ba ang nagtatawag?
Lamig dito sa lugar nyo. Hindi ako sanay. Hindi sanay yung probinsyanong balat ko.
All right. May we now call on stage Mr. Carlo Luis Rabat, the President of Coconut Industry Investment Group. Ay, ito pala. may we request? And ito po yung winners na napili ni Joshua. 10 po ito. Siya na po ang magtatawag sa inyo.
Oh my God. Okay. Una. Parang graduation to. Doctor.
Si Dr. Maria Concepcion.
Dr. Maria Concepcion Lizada. You know. Pangalawa, DIT Provincial Director Melu Macabre. Pangatlo, Dr. Fabian Dairit. Kasama din si Miss Jenica May Roma Santa. Jenica May Roma Santa. Okay. Kasama din po si Miss Priscilla P. Flores. Kasama din po si Miss Pauline Jo A. Prudentino. Pauline Jo. Ay. Ano po yun? Ayan. Kasama din po si Joanna Marie F. Macaraig. Joanna Marie F. Macaraig. Kasama din po si Engineer Evan Titus Paul Labrador. Asan po si Engineer? May isa pa rin. Ano po? Of course. Kasama din po si Engineer Clifford Tagaktak. Engineer Clifford Tagaktak. And last but not the least, Kimberly Custodio. Kimberly Custodio.
Alright. Yan po ang ating mga winners at meron po silang free picture, no? Selfie with Joshua Garcia. Sila po ang mga early birds natin, ang mga participants na pumunta po dito kanina. That's the reason why sila po ang napili ni Joshua. Right, palapakan po natin ang ating mga winners. Maraming salamat po. Alright, yung raffle po, I mean yung gift pack, ay kukunin niyo po sa ating secretariat. Mga winners, the gift pack po is available at our secretariat. Pakuha na lang po sa kanila. And yung pong gift pack natin is from Minola. Alright. Sige po, we will take time, no, na magpa-photo opportunity yung ating winners. And then of course, our audience naman. By group na lang, no, by table. Okay? Sige lang po, may time po tayo lahat. Huwag kayong mag-alala, ako ang magko-control. Joke lang. Okay, guys. Wala na daw pong picture, sorry. Pag hindi kayo pupunta sa table nyo, kasi si Joshua ang pupunta sa table nyo para mag-click ng picture, alright? Sige. Assemble na lang po sa table nila and Joshua will come to your table for the photo opportunity. Alright? Sige po, mag-ready na kayo sa picture opportunity with Joshua together with our Minola officers. Right? May we request you later, sir, na pupunta na lang po sa table ng participants natin for the... Dito. Kasi pwede po stay na lang po tayo for our some officials po. May we request our DTI representatives and then all right, DTI representatives, please. On deck is PCA, lahat ng PCA natin, officers and staff. On deck, our cocoa farmers. And then, our coconut processors. Opo, stay na lang po yung ating mga Minola officers po for the photo opportunity. Okay po, please arrange yourself na lang po muna bago po mag-selfie. Sorry po. Pa-arrange na lang po ng sarili po natin bago po mag-selfie. Sige po, come forward po para mas malinaw yung picture natin. Okay, lahat po ng DTI, please arrange yourselves. Hindi na nakita si Joshua. Natabunan nyo na. Minola officers, kailangan din daw po kayo dito sa taas. Minola officers. Yes po. Yes po. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. Sabay-sabay, Minola. Ayun. Sige po, 5 seconds para sa selfie. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 2. Alright, maraming salamat po. Next are our PCA officials and staff. Please come forward. Our PCA officials and staff. Lahat po ng PCA officials and staff, kindly come forward. May we also call on our Minola officers and staff to come po on stage. Alright, on deck, our cocoa farmers. Ready na lang po. Sige po, mamaya na muna ang selfie. Unahin po muna natin yung group picture. Okay, kindly arrange yourself. Come forward po. Dito po, banda. Come forward. Ayan. Sige po, arrange yourself. Baka meron pang ibang taga-PCA. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Smile, ayan, smile. Waki. Tapos PCA. Alright. 10 seconds para sa selfie. 9 seconds. Alright, paakyat na po ang ating mga coco farmers. Paakyat na po. All our coco farmers. Alright, kindly arrange yourselves na lang po.
I got a flip phone, don't get whipped, no. Step up in that place and you know I'm the shit though. No need for intro, watch how you step though. If you get way too close, I'ma blow. If I say no, then no.
Okay, kindly arrange yourselves. Sige po.
Just cause I'm smiling, easy to talk to, don't think I won't put you out.
Okay, pa-arrange na lang po dito sa harap. Harap po, group picture. Sige po, dito sa harap. Alright, 1, 2, 3, smile. Smile. Waki. Waki. Coconut. Yun. Alright. Coco processors po. Next. Our coco processors. Please come forward. Sige po, kindly arrange yourselves na lang po, our coco processors. Standby po our partner organization and all the rest. And all the rest of our participants. Okay, group picture po muna. Later, we'll have time for the selfie. Pa-arrange na lang po ang sarili natin. Okay? Sige po. Okay po, group picture po muna. We will have time for the selfie.